What if we could start over? Forget zoning battles, aging infrastructure, and NIMBY politics. A new breed of visionary developers is providing significant capital to build entire cities from scratch, complete with AI governance, flying cars, and carbon-neutral everything. While traditional cities struggle with traffic, housing crises, and climate change, mega projects worldwide are racing to become the world's first post-urban city centers. These aren't just real estate deals. They're bets on how 10 billion people will live in 2050. But can you really engineer cities at this scale without incremental growth over time? This is the Great Real Estate Reset. New rules for a new era. Please welcome Peter Grant, Tom Sweeney, Kyle D. Brain, Marwan Aboudib, and Travis McCready.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Grant. I'm a reporter with the Wall Street Journal. I've been writing about commercial real estate for more than 15 years. Very excited when I got the invitation to join, partly because this is a subject I know very little about, but I'm not the expert here. I'm just supposed to be asking questions. That's one thing journalists do. They also wait until the end to write their stories, which is what I did to get the panelists' questions, so I apologize for that. I sent them all emails at midnight last night telling them what we're going to be talking about. So what I'd like to start off doing, let's just go down the row, have everybody introduce themselves and explain how they fit into the great scheme of things.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kyle De Brain, not D Brain. I'm managing director at Leesman. Leesman is part of the HQO family. We were acquired by HQO about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. What Leesman does and what I do in my role is work with mostly tenant occupier organizations all around the world, very big ones, some small ones, some medium-sized ones. But we help them understand how what their employee experience metrics look like. So how do their employees use their workplaces? How well are their workplaces performing in allowing their employees to actually do their work? We work with landlords as well, so we go across different types of setups within buildings. And then we research that data, we collect that data. We have 1.5 million responses to our survey, our main core survey tool, and that allows the PhDs in our business to research that information. And then we share a lot of that research with the world, and that's the insights of what makes great experiences. I think what I'm going to hopefully bring today is the experience piece from the human outwards, let's say, what that looks like, hopefully in future cities. Not just about work, but we heard earlier about the third. There is a life that we have to live, and work is a part of that. But understanding that from a sort of employee level outwards, I think is where I'm interested.
And Travis, I think, I'm sorry, Kyle.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said when we were talking earlier, which I think you dropped the headline, is the work you've been doing on the new JP Morgan Chase headquarters in New York.
Yeah.
Just tell, I'm so excited about that. This is the biggest project that's happening in New York City right now, and,
wow,
and he's been working on it. And it relates to our subject.
Yeah, you've gone straight for the kill there. Yeah, it's really timely because I think it's already opened, the building, 270 Park, which is, if you don't know, you probably should know, but JP Morgan's new headquarters. Yeah, I'm actually visiting next week, Wednesday, Thursday. I think I've got a tour there, so super excited to see the finished product. We worked with JP Morgan, back from 2019 onwards, but around 21, 22, we started helping them understand the employees that would be going into this building and what does their work profile look like, what do they need from an environment, right? We worked with the architects there, Gensler, for example, looked at the designs that they were planning, and then matched that with the employee requirements, right? And that sort of then started adjusting the allocation of meeting spaces, the size of meeting spaces, the setup ultimately of what each of those floors look like. Played those out. Now it's a very challenging project because the original plan was probably to get most of JP Morgan's New York campus employees in there, but now they've got bigger over the years, so the project's evolved over time. But it's really exciting. Obviously, they've done everything with that building that you could think of from an employee experience perspective, which is super exciting. And we're going to really, we'll hopefully measure that early next year and see what that looks like.
Right, great. Travis?
It's a great building. It's a really great building. Travis McCready, title is Head of Global Industries for the Commercial Real Estate Advisory, JLL. As you guys probably know, we're the second largest commercial real estate advisory in the world. My portfolio includes pretty much anything science and technology related. Life sciences, healthcare, data centers, aerospace and defense, advanced manufacturing, and the like, all over the world. We help find great companies to go into great spaces. We help good spaces become great spaces. We build cities, we build districts, and we fill them up with fabulous people like yourselves. Point of reference, I'm the I was the first executive director of the Kendall Square Association, so love to talk about the Kendall Square area if you'd like, and the history of Kendall Square, maybe correct a couple of misconceptions that may have been said about Kendall Square. I'm very fortunate to sit on some advisory boards at universities all over North America, including Johns Hopkins and U of T, so I like to stay close to innovation as much as I possibly can. And I think part of the reason why I'm here is to talk about a little project that we've got going on out in California called California Forever.
Great. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Also, I was doing some research online. You have a BA in philosophy, am I right about that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, we'll have to add that philosophical
God.
element
Now you've done it.
to the conversation. Tom?
Hi, so thank you. I'm the VP of Technical Innovation and Sustainability at Majid Al Futtaim. Obviously not our region here, so we're from the Middle East. We are one of the largest private developers in the Middle East with a portfolio of about $20 billion of assets. We are primarily known outside the region for our shopping malls. I'm sure you've all seen pictures of the snow in the desert. Ski Dubai is our asset, which I think Marwan grew up using as well, which is good. We are venturing out of primarily shopping malls and doing more larger mixed-use communities now, about 1,000 acres. So that's probably something that we'd like to talk about today, because a lot of our sites are greenfield. We're building the cities from the ground up.
And have you ever actually skied on the ski slope?
Yes, I have, and my kids learned to ski in there as well. But ironically, it's now getting old for Dubai terms, so it's 20 years old now, so we're looking at how you redevelop it. So that's the cycle of what old is in Dubai. A little bit different to here.
Wow. And Marwan?
Hi everyone, Marwan Abadib. I'm a founder of Takuma Urban Innovation, started at MIT actually. So I was born in that experimental playground, Dubai, born and raised. And that inspired me that the city was not perfect, the world needs more. So I came to MIT, studied architecture, real estate, and started the company in partnership with MIT professor Dennis Frenchman. He's a pioneer in the field of city design. So what Takuma does is we plan cities from ground up, not just the design vision, also the economic vision. We've partnered with JLL many, many times, actually in the Middle East. And now we're designing cities in Africa, Asia, and hopefully soon Latin America. And yeah, it's exciting to be back, so thank you so much. I'm based in Dubai, and I do come to Boston every now and then, so thank you.
Our conversation is going to be mostly forward-looking about cities being built from the ground up, but I thought it might be good to start with a little bit of historical perspective and talk a little bit about how cities have changed over the decades, going from manufacturing, heavy industry, thought, technology, and now what? What are cities really accomplishing for human beings? Why do we even need them? And I thought that Travis, your BA in philosophy, might help us on that. I'll let you start off on that question. What are cities for, and how has that changed?
Wow, that puts me on the spot. But you come on, help me out a little bit. But look, I actually would reframe the question you posed a wee bit, and also suggest that the prior panel. And this whole framing around cities having changed, maybe we might take it from a little bit of a different vector, and that is to suggest that cities have not changed. They have always been a place for people to interact. They have always been a place for families to engage. They have always been a place for economic invention and intervention. They've always been a place for us to live, work, play. We've always loved them and we've always hated them. That's kind of the purpose of cities, to get people together, to get strangers together, to engage, to interact, to experience diversity of economies, diversity of people, diversity of thought, religion, all of it. That's always been what cities have been for. Whether it's the technology, the underlying technology is manufacturing and advanced manufacturing or defense. The underlying technology is building cars or, as it was around the corner here, building vulcanized rubber. Whether it's, whether the religion is, whether it's a mosque or whether it's a Catholic church, I think those are technicalities that don't always stand the test of time. I think our job in commercial real estate is to be flexible and adaptable, to create and to power and enable those economies and those environments to always thrive. That's, I think, the purpose of a city.
Okay, and Kyle, maybe you could give us some insight just from all the data that you've gone through. I mean, how have people's thoughts about cities changed? What do they need from them?
Yeah, I think it is the right question, because we're in a point where, the guys mentioned earlier, let's not talk about return to office much, but that is what we saw happen in 2020. I mean, we have the data behind it, so we started measuring home experience as well as the office experience we had. And the first thing we learned was that the average home is outperforming the average office on an experience level by like 10 points on our scale, so about 10 to 15%. And we're like, okay, wow. And we have 21 activities that we do in our sort of data set, let's say the things that employees do. 17 out of 21 were better supported in an average home versus an average office. So us as individuals, as employees, as humans, we're suddenly looking at our homes very differently, because they were actually providing a fantastic office experience compared to many of the experience we had in the office. So then this, why is that important? The perspective of employees changed so drastically. The commute became so highly scrutinized, right? The choice that we had and the freedoms that we were granted translated into us heavily scrutinizing the need to go into a workplace, right? And that's not the only reason for cities existing, but it's the predominant one, right? So I think we have to imagine the purpose, maybe not holistically. Obviously, Travis, like you said, the core purpose generally remains the same, but we have to reframe it and have to think about what do we need to have as many people coming to that central point, whereas in 2019 that decision was, for most knowledge workers anyway, was not really part of the decision-making process.
Marwan, why don't you tackle the question, but also you can look backward if you want, but also particularly at the years where we've started to see these smart cities develop. And this isn't just conceptual. I mean, at some point, and I think maybe you can help, and Tom could also help give us some historical perspective. When did we start seeing cities appear out of nowhere? And where has that happened? And how many have there been?
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. Travis, you're correct, but I do want to address it. Cities do serve the same purpose for people, absolutely, but they also reflect what society needs the most today. And I think we're changing as people, because as technology evolves, our needs are also evolving in a way. But cities always they served power, ambition, and if you look at Rome, Alexandria, and Egypt, it was always this, it's a monument, right? Its physicality was, here we are, this is the hub. But what we've seen as post-World War II is Brasilia in Brazil becoming the new capital, Islamabad in Pakistan. Again, state-run projects were saying, we're bringing it back. Like, this is the hub, this is the postcard image of our nation. Fast forward to China's rise, the economic free zone, Dubai also captured that. They became about industry and how can we capture capital, or movement of capital in the case of Dubai. And I guess today now it's all about innovation. Innovation districts, innovation hubs. In the past 15 years, we've seen 150 mega giga projects being launched. Mostly, they call it the Global South, Southeast Asia, India, Africa, Middle East. Because of climate change, urban centers cannot handle the influx of people anymore. It's becoming really critical for governments to say, okay, we need to plan ahead. We've been working on projects that are Vision 2050, but what is 2050? We don't even know what 2030 is going to be like. So it's interesting to see why they're hiring us, or why we as a firm are emerging, is to help them navigate the future, but we don't know what the future brings. So it's a bit of looking at responsive cities, that cities are not static. They keep asking for the blueprint. A blueprint is very static. They need to be adaptable, they need to be flexible. And that's the biggest challenge right now. How do we think of that? And I'm sure Tom can talk about it, because you're actually developing those.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. So interestingly, I put a different take on that. So obviously, you said you're born and raised in Dubai. As you can clearly tell from my accent, I'm not born and raised in Dubai. So I'm from Manchester in the UK. So normally people say, do you like Man United, Man City, are you a fan of Oasis? But what people forget is, we talked about it before, Dubai at the moment is going through a 4x journey. Back in the 18th century, Manchester went through a 7.5x journey. It was the center of the Industrial Revolution for the entire world. And that came from two things, well, three things. First was its location near to the port of Liverpool and all the canals that were built. Secondly, the horrendous weather. It basically rains all year round, which makes it great for spinning cotton. And third was innovation. And that was the invention of the spinning jenny, which is what obviously created the textile industrial revolution. So I look back now with hindsight, and I thought it was just a playground of terrace houses and factories and mills, but now you can see how it was scarred by innovation and the industrial revolution, and that shaped that city going forward. Then football stadiums came, obviously, but that was different. So now we look at Dubai, and Dubai's the same. So instead of the factories, instead of the mills and the chimneys, you've got ports capturing transfer of traffic, you've got the IFC capturing the transfer of money, you've got hospitality, you've got these different nodes, and housing is one of the biggest issues. So we're focusing a big pivot away from doing shopping malls and hotels to more mixed-use communities to try to tackle this, to create housing and communities where people want to live, where they can work as well and enjoy life without hitting the main roads and getting stuck in a traffic jam.
So you said 150 cities have been created out of scratch? Launched. Oh, launched. Okay.
Announced. Yeah, they're all. See, that's the biggest challenge. The more ambitious they are, the harder it is to deliver. But Dubai's done something amazing. It's because they've really been just going with the flow. Every time a new industry evolves, a few years ago it was the metaverse. They just jump on that and they say, we're the hub. Now it's AI, we're the hub. And people criticize that, but it's actually working because they are being very flexible and just going with the trend. But this is, again, it's interesting because Saudi Arabia now is trying to follow that blueprint. But there are some challenges. It's not the same.
Good. We will talk about them. And because I think a very interesting part of the conversation will be the lessons learned. What have people done wrong? What have people done right? But before we get there, Kyle, what do you know that would help inform us going forward in terms of what these new cities should look like? What have we learned about what people want, where they want to live, how they want to live? Are suburbs good? Are suburbs bad? All these lessons, if someone were to say, okay, I want to take everything you've learned and we want to incorporate that into a new city that's going to be rising from the ground, what would those lessons be?
Yeah, big question. I think, we focus on experience, and experience has, and this is in organizations, but it extrapolates into our, like I said, our human experience. That is on the top of the agenda for organizations all around the world. It was always hovering around, in the top 10, but it's shot to the top. And maybe for the wrong reasons. It's sort of a reaction to, hey, we want to maximize the human capital that we have within organizations. But the positive impact on that is that we're really curating experience on to new levels all the time now. A lot of these new projects we're seeing are really focused on that, right? And I think that's, if we're taking that into future cities, we think a lot about design and designing from the human outwards, right? Human-centered design or centric design, and that's super important. So that's probably one piece. If I just talk about commutes for a bit, we've just released some research on global commuting from our perspective. So we've got 110,000 responses from across the world. And we look at the quality of the commute, the duration of the commute, and also the mode of transport, right? And interestingly, there's a not surprisingly, but interestingly, there's a strong correlation to the type of commute, the type of transport that you use, right? Cars are, again, not a surprise, but on the least preferred mode of transport. In the States, in the US, we have, I think, 84% of our respondents using cars. And in Asia and other parts of the world, we're sort of in the 20s and 30%, right? And when you're using a car, the duration that you'll tolerate or thrive within a commute journey, sort of drops off really quickly after 15 minutes or 30 minutes. So if you're commuting 45 minutes or above, you're generally having a very low satisfaction with commuting. So without going down that rabbit hole too much, I think we talked about, it was interesting to hear about all the parking lots in the US and the highways. And the US was built around the motor car, right? The cities were built around that. When I moved from South Africa to London years and years ago, the first thing that struck me was how narrow all the roads are, right? Because it was built around the horse and cart. So I think if we kind of take all these lessons and go, well, what feels good? What's not noisy? How do we want to experience the commute? And I think it comes down to thinking about proximity and that duration of that journey and the way that people get around. I think that's something we really have to think about as we go forward. Yeah.
But what about something like return to office? I mean, would you, if someone were asking you for advice on creating a new city, has what we've learned in the past 5 years about return to office and where people want to work, would that change your answer? Would you give a different answer today than you would have 5 years ago?
Yes, I think what we know is that from an experience perspective, we want variety, right? Variety is the spice of life, and that rings true across how we want to experience our environments. If we see organizations or maybe some of these cities moving too fast sometimes and just cookie cutter designing, I think what we're looking for in the future is curated, unique, interesting experiences that we can identify with. We talked about these different cities around the world and what makes them special, right? And what makes them unique. I think that's critical to think about and strategize as we go forward with these things. Yeah.
And Travis, why don't we start talking about California? And first of all, could you kind of explain what's going on there in case people haven't heard? And secondly, how are some of these issues beginning to play out there?
Yeah, I mean, and we can all jump in on California Forever. I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with it in some degree or fashion. To level set, is there anyone here not familiar with California Forever? If they're just like raise your hand. Okay, so really quickly, California Forever is the site is in Solano County, California, which is pretty much equidistant between Sacramento and San Francisco. It's about 7,000 acres, roughly, of former poor grazing and tilling land in California. Our client acquired the land over the course of 8 years, 8.5 years or so, on a single thesis. The notion that Silicon Valley and the Bay Area being the epicenter of some of the world's greatest innovations, yet there is no capacity within that region to manufacture that which is being researched, innovated, and developed. And the thesis was true innovation creates a very neat virtuous cycle between discovery, research, innovation, development, manufacture, and the process and the cycle starts over and over again. A great example of that being in Shenzhen, China. So the notion was to create a new city housing that would be capable of housing up to 600, 700,000 unique souls, to focus on the technology and the innovation itself of manufacturing, being able to bring manufacturing at scale to Silicon Valley and to California. And so, as you guys have worked on before, that's a great thesis to begin with, and then the problems start. It's like you have really fundamental questions that you have to start to ask and answer immediately once you have the land and the regulatory scheme bottled up. You have to ask and answer questions about what type of economic activity and where is that economic activity going to be located. You have to ask and answer questions that you're asking about transportation and people getting in, around, and through the city. Living, housing, what type of housing, for what type of income levels, and what continuous range of income levels, for what type of workers. What we're at the thin end of the wedge, I'd say, of some of those questions. Trying to do it from a standpoint and a thesis of grace. We don't want to just build a city. We want to build a great city. It's somewhat easy to name 150 cities that want to start, but to want to build a great city is actually quite complicated and difficult. That's the challenge that we have before us with the project that we are at the earliest stages on.
And you say early stages, so if I were to go there today, would I see bulldozers pushing dirt around and streets being put in
Again,
sewers?
7,000 acres, there are parts of the parcel that, yes, you would start to see development take place. There have been agreements that have been signed with future tenants that will build. I should say the first node of the project will be focused on shipbuilding. And you might ask, why shipbuilding? The United States has virtually no capacity to build military, commercial, or other types of vessels. In 1 year, China has the capacity to build more vessels than we have in the United States to build vessels since World War II. We just have no capacity whatsoever to build. So the first aspect and the first node, and there's a deep water port on this site, which is adjacent to Travis Air Force Base. The first node is to focus on a shipbuilding foundry. So if you go to that node, that section, yes, you can start to see activity, the dredging that's taking place in the water, the necessary infrastructure to build a foundry, but somewhat unparalleled to that, we're asking questions about, okay, where does the housing for workers go? How distant or how close to the foundry should it be? What should employees' experience be from the foundry to their homes? Where do you start to layer in and feather in mixed use? So that you're not just creating a bedroom community, which I think we can all agree on is not a definition of a good or a great city. So yes, the short answer is there are shovels in the ground and cranes in the air today. But again, this process will take will take decades, not days.
Got it. So let's go to the lessons learned section of the discussion, and I think it'll be great for Marwan and Tom to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned from these cities that have actually been built or are being built. I mean, what are the good things that you would certainly want to incorporate into new cities, and what are the mistakes made, things that have happened that you sort of say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that again. Tom, do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. So if we rewind 25 years, when our late founder, Mr. Majid Al-Fatim, was coming up with the idea of building Mall of the Emirates, everyone laughed at him because they said, it's in the middle of the desert, nobody goes down there. And if you look now, it's one of the center aspects of Dubai. So it was very much founded on the build it and they'll come mentality. But if you look at the way that Dubai's expanded, it's very linear. It runs along the coast. So all the traffic is very linear. The highways are linear. The cross-pollination is a big challenge. So that's, I think, something that future cities need to take cognizance of. And it's impacted not only the roads, but also the public transport. Our metro line is linear. So if you want to get away from a metro station, there's no way of doing it. So we are very car heavy. And coming back to the point previously about their city centres here sometimes being parking lots, we have the exact same issue. Trying to get people out of their cars is very, very difficult. So much so that if you look at our new development with Garth Woods, we can touch on it later, but it's very much focused on wellness and sustainability, and we're having to submerge all the car parking for the whole community underneath the development. So we've ended up putting deck car park below so we can have a green planted podium for the rest of it. That's how much it is a challenge to actually get the parking in there. So I think the initial model of how we initiate the ideas for these cities, trying to get a matrix approach and a non-linear approach is a big help. And that's what we now translate to when we're looking at our master developments, making sure we've got radial circuits, ring roads in there to try and make sure we can move people quicker.
What about retail? That's one of your specialties. Has that changed, or is the mall that you developed 20 years ago still good for the next 20 years?
So I think we're in a part of the world where retail is very different to the West. Our malls are still thriving, and we've had to do very minimal touches on them to maintain that. And I think that's primarily because the mall is still the center of the beating heart of the city. It's still the town center as well. So if you look at the Western world, you have your town center, and then you have a mall on the outskirts. Our malls are where people come to celebrate the weekend and congregate. One of the craziest things I still haven't got my head around after 18 years is the mall is busy from 8 a.m. till 2 a.m. It is busy all day. There's no peak, it's just busy. And that's been compounded during COVID, where it's just got more and more successful. So ironically, the issue we have with our car parks is getting people in and out. So the mall car parks are what limit the size of our mall and the footfall. If we could build 4 times as much car park, we'd be happy. Because the way it translates at the moment is 1 car park space for us at Mall of the Emirates translates to 1 million dirhams a year income. So if we could build more, we would do.
Marwan, on our prep call, we were talking a lot about.
I think this is where it starts getting controversial.
Oh,
the reason
bring it on.
the reason I left Dubai was because the challenge of malls, and the reason why they're so crammed is because you can't be outdoors. There's nothing to do, and that's the problem. Interesting enough, the plot opposite your mall, we worked on the 3rd or 4th iteration of what would be Dubai's new downtown. Dubai's downtown keeps moving every 10, 20 years. It's a bit crazy. But this one, we work with a lot of MIT's research labs to future-proof our strategies. And it was like, okay, what is the city of the future, and how can Dubai evolve yet again? And we started talking about the retail experience in the mall, and in the face of climate change, and yes, it's a hot desert arid city, how can we make it more comfortable to walk outside and shop outside? And I know people think it's crazy, but today with technology, buildings can generate more. They can do more. They're more energy efficient. And where urban design comes in is also, if you look at old Dubai, which was the historic center that was like 300 years ago, the weather is actually a few degrees cooler. So thinking of passive design strategies where with skyscrapers, not just low-rise buildings, we're still able to generate some of what worked back then. So we're coming kind of full cycle. But again, the mall's great. I'm always stuck in traffic. I do go to that mall a lot, but we do need to stop being introverted and start being more extroverted so that people can actually bump into each other. You look at European cities, they're amazing, right? Because they're just, you sit in a piazza plaza, you bump into someone, ideation happens, and that leads to innovation. Same thing with MIT, Kendall Square. The reason why everyone wants to be like MIT, the campus lifestyle, because you have different students from different backgrounds bumping into each other. So we need to bring that into cities. But going back to your core question, wellness and well-being, health is now the central theme. I know a lot of your projects are also focusing on this. More parks, the public realm. We've forgotten about the public realm in the 20th century. It was all about, this is my plot of land and that's it, right? So we need to start integrating more of that. And then culture. I can go on and on about culture, but cities are becoming very generic globally. They all look the same. So how do we do that?
Sure, go ahead. And then
I just wanted to ask these guys, just before we move on from cars and parking and all that, are there any cities that have really cracked this and solved this, as in not relying on motor vehicles to expand, and the challenges that you've just mentioned, right, Tom? Like, how do we? Is there best in class out there that's solved this issue?
Look, I think the best I've experienced is Singapore.
Yep.
So if you look, you can go and walk around a lot of Singapore, and obviously they've done that from a master planning perspective,
Yep.
but also from a tax perspective. It's ridiculously expensive to get a car there, and it works. And coming back to your point before, Marwan, it's funny, when you speak to anybody or go traveling with anyone that lives in Dubai, the first thing they do is go for a walk around the city. As soon as we get out of Dubai, we want to walk around. So yesterday I went walking around because we can't do it. And I think that's one of the lessons learned, which is breaking down these silos between developers, because particularly in the Middle East, we'll have our own master development, then next door our competitor will, but we won't share. There's no connectivity to it, so you can't transit outside of that on foot. And the government are now trying to break these walls down and actually blend it all together. But I think that would be a lesson learned just to plan that in from the start.
But I think that's a great question, because how do we keep all these cities from just all looking the same? I mean, how do you infuse the city with the culture of the geography and the people and what people do there for a living? I mean, there's so much variety and diversity in this planet, and why is it our cities all kind of seem interchangeable? So you know, I'd like everyone to sort of take a crack at that. Marwan, you raised the question, so you get to come up with the answer.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge. I think the 20th century focused a lot on consumption. Cities were made for people to consume, and that led to a lot of things. But now it's about making. How can how can we enable people to focus on their companies, to make more culture, actually, if anything. You mentioned California Forever focusing on Navy building, was that shipbuilding?
Shipbuilding.
And you referenced the term nodes. We always use the word nodes too, but it's interesting because that creates a brand, that creates an image, a perception, and then somehow the architecture can start to reflect that. See, the role of the master developer is quite interesting and really important. So a master developer is basically massive parcel of land, and then they act like the government. And most of the master developers that we deal with are private-public partnerships with the state. So they create design guidelines, architectural guidelines, and more than ever, specifically Saudi Arabia, it's a bit scary how intense they are about developing this style. Like, what is the style of this new city? What are the rules? What's the code? And they would not issue a permit for sub-developers if they don't meet that scoring system. So I think we're hopeful that we're going back to thinking of, architectural guidelines and actually respecting them. I haven't seen that happen in full effect yet today, but the intent is definitely there.
So is there anyone on the flip side of that? Who, the counterpart to Saudi Arabia is saying, hey, bring it, we want as much creativity and differences in our designs. We're not really.
Yes. Actually, this is where it gets exciting. We've pivoted a bit from the focus on the Middle East to now West Africa. Africa actually wants to be the next Middle East, which is going to happen given the demographics. Right. They always say, we want to be like Dubai, we want to be like Dubai. But the interesting thing is Dubai has done a lot of good things, but there are certain challenges. It does feel a bit generic and hasn't focused too much on culture. Now they are. But in Abidjan, the capital of Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, the client is saying, okay, we need Ivorian architecture. We don't even know what that is. So we're creating that. And we're like, okay, where do we start, right? So leveraging AI, we've been building a database of anything that relates to the country, from its nature to its specific flower, to the animals, colors, textures, patterns. And we're building this AI model that immediately we can plug in our city design, just as blocks and cubes, and it will create multiple iterations of different styles, and then we can control the parameters. This is a whole new frontier of architectural thinking, but our clients love it. Why? Because it's very rooted in place, and we build that story. So I do believe that we have a lot of hope and opportunity in Africa to do something that's not generic, and the clients there, the governments, really want that.
So from Africa to California, Travis, how is that effort sort of dealing with this whole question of saying, we want this to look unique, we want it to give it soul, we want it to reflect the people who live here and work here?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting tension between design guidelines and architectural language, central planning, and serendipity. that we're trying to really exploit that tension by at the outset, our client is baking in this knowledge that while we should have a relationship with the California authorities about zoning and zoning regulation, and it's 7,000 acres controlled by a singular entity. Almost by definition, you cannot achieve serendipity. You cannot achieve diversity by having that degree of central control, that degree of central urban planning control. So from the outset, the goal is to try and hardwire in diverse thought by hardwiring in pockets where the architectural language actually might change. One district, you might have architectural language and a sense of subcontractors and sub-ownership for 20, but that's not going to persist throughout the entire 7,000 acres. And again, that breaks down a little bit this notion of singular thought, so that you're not going to get just a bunch of commercial real estate guys building a glass tower with blue glass and steel skin and no offense to downtown Toronto, but it looks like downtown Toronto, which could be anywhere in the world. Did I just throw shade at downtown Toronto on camera? Shoot. I did. And I did it again. But really trying to allow for that centralized owner to really serve as almost as a constant gardener, not as a paternalistic determiner of culture, architectural features, and urban plan and design. So that's one. The second is the great thing about European cities is that they've stood the test of time for centuries. So when building new cities and building a new environment in Solano County, what's the degree to which you go out and you find old buildings and you buy them and bring them to break up the architectural and design language, whatever it may be, because we tend to think of a great city that you've been to. You tend to love that city because it's not all brand new. There are little pockets, whether it's a church or a religious institution or an old school. There are old buildings amongst the design language. So that's another thing that we're doing to try and, again, create a little bit of unique cultural environment that is not cookie cutter and looking like every other new city in the past 50 to 75 years.
Marwan, you brought up, I'm sorry, Carl, did you want to say?
I was just going to add, I like the term you use as gardener, just because, you know, I think we as humans have evolved to, we have to have nature introduced to these plans, right? Like, you see, again, going back to the office or even some of these cities, like there's no straight lines in nature, and we see so many straight lines in our modern world. A lot of the modern great offices that we're measuring now, just there's curves everywhere, there's plants everywhere, the materials, the natural light, like it's about incorporating that irregularity or the what's the word? You know, in nature, it's inconsistent, right? And that's what we thrive and enjoy and feel is our natural habitat, right? So I think going back to design guidelines and saying you need to be within these parameters, etc. It's kind of, it's good to have structure, of course, but you have to introduce randomness for it to feel natural and for us to sort of connect to it.
No, but that's the thing. You're absolutely right. It's designing for informality. Yeah. We like the cities when things are not so perfect, and that's where it kind of contradicts the concept of creating these mega cities.
Totally.
We're obsessed with control.
Yes.
And cities cannot be controlled, and that's why they have to be responsive, flexible, adaptive. But we can seed certain neighborhoods and let the rest fill in, because that's actually how it works. It will end up being.
And one thing I wanted to mention, Steve mentioned that I guess an MIT published book is called Value of Design, and it gets into a lot of these whole questions about the use of design to create soul for a city. And I haven't read the book, but it sounds like be a good read. Let's go back to what you're saying about AI, though, because it sounds intriguing, as everything about AI does. But then, if everyone's using AI, to answer these questions, isn't there a danger that everything winds up looking the same because you get the same answers? So how do you change the variables?
Absolutely. If AI replaces architects, everything is going to be generic, and that's the fear. But if it's used as a catalyst, as a tool to imagine multiple design futures, right, where we can actually, generative design is beautiful because it enables developers to quickly, within minutes, just see what this could do, what that could do. So I think what's important is AI starts working for us to understand our behavior, how we live in cities, and then it also enables the designers to explore more possibilities, right? I don't think, you're absolutely right, and this is now a bit of a controversial topic because we used to hire visualization companies and spend a lot of money, and now we've been giving we've reduced that to almost nothing. But it goes back to how we're leveraging AI to build these unique models that can create a unique architectural language. So it's definitely a tool. But I do believe also AI will be very good for building systems, adaptive systems, where it would start to create efficiencies where if you need to know where you need to build more housing, how far it is, because today's cities it's not about density, it's about proximity. The concept of the 15-minute city, people just want to be able to walk and get whatever they need within 15 minutes. And AI can start to help that. It could start to predict where investment needs to be allocated. In the past we were blind, and now we have these models that are helping us.
So I have a few more questions, and then I'll open up to the general audience. And this is more of a pet peeve of mine, but can we all agree that suburbs are not the answer? That sort of mode of development has really done so much damage to Western cities and probably cities throughout the world, or not. I don't like driving around the suburbs. I think my aesthetics are under complete assault. There's no sense of place. It's just, don't get me going. But is that just a broad sort of general conclusion that the experts like yourselves have drawn, or how do you deal with the need for density and the need among a lot of people to just go have their own yard and their own land out there in the suburbs? How does that work? Maran, do you want to start?
I actually think we should stop obsessing about cities. I know it's funny for someone who runs a city design company. I think we should look at the periphery towns and rural areas as well, because as much as we obsess about cities, if we look at mental health, we're not as productive anymore. We have to look at the youth. What are their demands now? Gen Z, next Gen Alpha. So I do think there's an opportunity in suburbs where we invest more time and look at that more closely to make them less generic. And to answer your question, yes, we're obsessed about having bigger space, more lots, but I think to reflect the desire of society today, we're looking for community. We're looking for meaningful relationships. And that is not that easy to find in megacities. And I think planners are not able to study. They just don't look at that. And what suburbs or smaller towns can do is start thinking about more niche, concentrated quality of life, because it's digestible. We worked on a city that was meant for a population of 7 million people by 2050. How do you even start? But if you look at a small suburb or a town that has 10, 20,000 people, you can move the needle much more, and that prototype can start to influence future development. So that's how I would respond to this right now.
It's a great answer. Tom, how are people in Dubai thinking about this?
Yeah, I think Maran touched on it before. If you look at Dubai, the centre of Dubai's moved over the years, and it's because we end up with these cities in with the city. So it's similar to harking back to the UK. London, in the same way, expanded and just swallowed up multiple towns on the way. Dubai city centres, they're just building another city centre and another city within a city, rather than focusing on that central district. And I think that's working quite well. Is it the perfect way to do it? No, but it's a good example of where you can potentially adapt. But the challenge then becomes when you're looking at these newer plots, it's how do you make them less Disney? So One of the problems we have is if you do these design parameters, it becomes too artificially created. And then I can give you some good examples. I won't name them because the competitors who have got it wrong, where you give too much flexibility, and then there's no consistency between the development then, and it doesn't really tie together. So interestingly, we primarily went into the residential market with single homes. So in Dubai, you'll see a lot of master communities which are villa-based. What we saw from the feedback from people living in the city is, actually what we want is we don't want to live in these central large high-rise towers in the central business district. We like living in apartments, but we'd like the public realm. So if you look at what we've then pivoted that to with our recent development, it's now lower rise apartments sat within a massive public realm which you would normally see in a villa community, but it's now in an apartment community, which gives a different entry point to different customers as well.
Can I just jump in on the community piece, which Mohan mentioned? I think that's absolutely crucial for, I mean, Dunbar's number famously is 150, around, like, it's not perfect science necessarily, but how many acquaintances, close friends, et cetera, you have. And I think around 500 is where the sort of limitation of how we can have meaningful relationships with each other. And in a big city or mega city, what you mentioned, you've surrounded by millions of people, and people are just becoming more isolated. Technology's not always helping that, right? The way our behaviors are, set with that. If we start to think about using AI agents more, that could potentially make us even more isolated. Actually, in preparation for this, I had a look in our data, or I had our team look, and in the buildings we measure, when we get to about 500 employees, there's a sort of drop-off of experience, average across the world, and a drop-off of the expression of sense of community as well, right? So it's kind of correlates to this Dunbar's rough number. I know it's, as I said, not a perfect science necessarily, but when you're surrounded by too many people, you start to become lonely. There's a loneliness epidemic, the isolation, and those sort of factors come in. So future cities, neighborhoods, I think neighborhoods is the strategy, and thinking about how we organize people in logical sort of sizes so that they can smile at each other and get to know each other and not ignore each other. Like, I lived in London for a long time. You don't knock on your neighbor's door, generally speaking. Like, there's these invisible walls, even though we're all surrounded by millions of people. Go on the tube in London, you don't make eye contact with anyone. It's weird if you do, right? And I moved down to Devon a few years ago. Go back to London, and I can just feel it, the difference. How people down in Devon, which is a very small sort of countryside community, people smile at each other, talk to each other, say hello to each other. If we're going to build future cities, I think that's what we should be trying to solve for on some level.
Yeah, and Travis, how's California forever?
Again, I think that's, and I appreciate you giving me the first slow pitch softball on defining a city, but to everyone's point here, I think we should stop this balkanization and the vilification of suburbs versus cities, because it's not really helpful. What we're trying to do is create communities for people, create communities and neighborhoods, and that can occur in multiple different urban or suburban formats. In California Forever, as a project, the goal, yes, we are a commercial real estate advisory, and so we have advice around the commercial realm, but the commercial realm is only as important as the community in which it sits. And so this advice and what we're trying to build and what our client is trying to build isn't a city per se, but a community environment, a dense community environment in which there is going to be high commercial GDP impact, and that is enjoyable. A place that people can live, work, play, be emotionally healthy, physically healthy, psychically healthy, and that they can love. Whether you call that a city or you call that a suburb, I think is irrelevant. We're trying to build, our client is trying to build a place that people will love.
Okay, that's a good point for us to switch from the panel to questions from the floor. So the conversation is now open up to questions, please.
So I'm curious, as we're discussing building these amazing new cities and talking about places people love and so forth, by requirement there has to be a various strata of economic, right? And so how do you build that into those plans
Anyone?
I'll
Sure.
start. It's when I first met the founder of California Forever with my team. One of my team members asked him. It was tongue in cheek. It wasn't a very serious question, but he basically said, 7,000 acres. I can't wait to see the plot that you've reserved for yourself for your enormous house. And his response was, yeah, that's not what this city is about. My home will be as modest and the same size as all of the middle-income homes that we're building in preparation for the income level of the individuals that will be working at the foundries that will be in the city. So hardwiring in from the start a notion of what your sidewalk streetscape should look like. The amenities and cultural amenities and social infrastructure that you want available to a continuous range of incomes. Hardwiring in this notion that your income range, because of advanced manufacturing, is going to be in the 60 to 120,000 annual salary, and then reverse engineering what type of housing stock you'll need and what concentration. That's how that's how we're starting this process. Not starting the process from, gee whiz, there's going to be some baller owner of a factory and he's going to need a 3-acre site for a 6,000 square foot home. So it's really about philosophy, it's about commitment, it's about priorities, and knowing for whom the city is designed to serve.
But how do you keep the owner from wanting that home? I mean, I think this is a big problem everywhere, that people want, I mean, what do you do about land speculation in any of these cities? I mean, how do you, because it seems like that motive, which is a very human motive,
it's a very human,
to be counter to a lot of the things that we've been talking about.
You can't root it out, but at least you can, and this is where commercial real estate, you can weaponize commercial real estate. You can't root it out, but you can at least prepare the economic pro forma for the place to intentionally design around the need for workers, the need for a continuous range of incomes, not to start from the standpoint of 6,000 square foot single family homes with et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't root it out, but you can design around it, however.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Marwan. When you're looking at developing cities in Africa, I mean, you have huge pieces of land. How do you prevent people from saying, "Oh, I'm going to grab, a couple thousand acres and wait for the railroad to come through"?
I love that question because that's the biggest controversy, depending on where we're working culturally. As you can tell, in the Middle East, it's very different, and that's what removes the soul from the city, actually, and that's why. We do need that. In Africa, it's interesting. The way our clients there, it's president, prime minister, and their goal is to accelerate economic GDP. So the city is a tool. And their goal is to get people from lower class incomes to middle class, because the power of any nation is how strong is the middle class. So this is part of the unfortunate part where they want to be just like Dubai, and we're like, wait, hold off. You still need social integration, you need affordable housing. Startups don't want to spend so much money on office space. They need cheap co-working space, kind of like what CIC here has done. It has been a struggle. It has been a big struggle in the markets that we're working at. Sometimes I need to reflect on what am I actually doing here if we're just creating this same cookie cutter thing. But I do believe time will tell. Time will tell, because that's the thing about cities. They do take time to get the response. But it is a hot topic that we always fight for in the meetings, yes.
Other questions? Yes, please.
I appreciate your questions, especially the one of the density need in suburban areas. My question more about the technological advancements of AI in those suburban areas. So as we know, COVID unlocked the remote work, and we probably will see more and more work being done remotely in those suburban areas, servicing a lot of companies in the cities. So while we're talking about the danger of gentrifications of bigger cities, around universities, around those hubs like Silicon Valley, can we also think about what is the future of remote work, where AI leads us towards, because most likely we won't have to work as a society 8 hours or more per day. And then what do we need to unlock in those suburban or peripheral neighborhoods in terms of bringing people together, in terms of unlocking maybe entertainment in person and not bringing people staying behind the screen. I don't think it's really, it matters that much to encourage density building, but rather when people will have more time to meet, to entertain, what do we need to unlock for placement capabilities and making people in the community to meet together?
Good question. Kyle, do you want to take a crack at it?
Well, it's something I think about a lot. We think about a lot. Yeah, absolutely. We've proved on many levels that we can work from anywhere for a lot of the time. We would definitely argue that working remotely all the time is not favorable for most, let's say, or everyone. So I mean, you're going back to the neighborhood discussion, everything looking the same. I think that is a challenge because a lot of us are spending more time in the same homes behind the screen. And I said it earlier, with agentic AI, we're going to become, our best buddy at work is going to be, a robot ultimately, not someone else who's another human we should be working with. So I think these are all major concerns. Is the solution, the city center? Probably not. I think you guys touched on it earlier, creating more variety within those environments around the cities and then making that into a sort of larger environment is probably somewhere where we need to go. I think the key, if we look at our younger demographics and we look at the data that they project, that they express, let's say, in experience levels, they want to be in the office more. They desire it. They need it. There's an increase of we see like the desire to learn from older colleagues effectively, learning from the experience that we want to be around. That is a huge problem right now because as we go up in age groups, people are spending more time at home versus the office, and we need to sort of try to find a way to balance that. Yeah. Yes, technology, AI, all those things are going to be layered onto that, and maybe our experiences working together when we're not actually physically together are going to get better and better. I'm not a fan of any sort of headsets or goggles, and I'm avoiding that as much as I can personally. But maybe that technology, as it gets more seamless, will start to adapt that, and we'll be able to be around each other, easier. But I think the value of being together in person, just from a anthropological perspective, like we absolutely crave that and need that. So it's about curating that. I don't know if that's a great answer necessarily, but I think these are definitely topics we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, the only addition I'd throw in there is I think we need to challenge. If there's one thing that I would counsel us all on is just based on our data, challenge our assumptions and challenge your assumptions about work from home. Who wants to do it and why? Because I think we throw this term around as if everyone wants to work from home, and we're certainly not seeing that is the case. We're seeing really vast demographic differences. The younger folks want to be in the office more frequently to receive some sort of career level guidance and progression and engagement. Older, 50 and up, we want to work at home supposedly. There are gender differences. It's not a monolith. We do see differences in how much people would like to work in the home, and we also see even within the course of the day. Just taking Boston for an example, if you take a look at our MBTA transit data, our data show that rush hour and the nature of rush hour has changed post-COVID. More frequently, we see parents wanting to be working from home before 10 a.m. to accommodate kids getting off to school and so on and so forth. and then leaving the office 2-3 p.m. and that dynamic and work from home in that context, I think, has unlocked a different level. Some might controversial say maybe unlocked too much efficiency in being able to add more economic value from the home office in the evening. So I appreciate the question, but I don't think that in terms of building these new cities, we, and certainly not in California Forever's context, we're thinking of work from home as a monolith. That there is a singular work from home experience and work from office experience that we need to accommodate. Instead, I think we have a much more difficult challenge, which is, again, creating a diverse, vibrant community cultural experience that can unlock economic value, create healthy human beings as technology unlocks different modes and different types of work.
So we've run out of time. I was told I could go just in 1 minute or 2 minutes longer, and I did want to kind of conclude with the issue that Marwan raised when we were doing our prep call, because it was really an interesting question and a good one to sort of think about as we leave. And he said we should maybe think about cities not just as places where people live, but as places that can influence the rest of the world. So, in other words, you're not just creating a place for the people that are going to be there, but something that's powerful that can say, hey, world, look at how we're doing it, and maybe you should learn something from this, and that could be part of the culture of a city. I don't know. It seemed like a really interesting point. Do you want to delve into it at all?
I'll just keep it short, and thank you for bringing that up. The word pioneering is interesting, because to pioneer and to innovate, you truly have to do something that hasn't been done before. And the challenge with most of our projects and the way strategy consultants, there's always a McKinsey or a BCG out there that's just building their entire report on benchmarks, what has been done. Thing is, we as a consumer, we're evolving so fast that we can't just keep copying what has been done. We have to imagine a future that's different. And the message here is, how can we create a model that can inspire other countries to follow? And that's what Saudi Arabia is doing, actually. It's so controversial, but they really think that they could create a whole new way of living. Whether it's going to happen, that's the challenge. But I do think we need to start thinking about the future and stop just building everything on what has worked. Everyone wants to be like Europe, European cities. That was for that time, that era. We can't just copy Paris and London anymore. We have to really think of new systems, something we've been introducing as a 3-dimensional city. With mobility, everything is going to change. And we have to start thinking of new industries that will come tomorrow that we don't know about.
Okay, great thought, maybe for the next panel. But thanks, everybody. And thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Appreciate it.